You see Santiago Ponzinibbio just fucking did it. Losing the first 2 rounds, comes out in the third and gets a knockout. Because Alex Morono was willing to strike with him. I think Jared Gordon did not want to put himself in that predicament because he thought he had already done the work to win the fight. And in my opinion, I thought he did. But at the same time, what was not going through my head was this is not a regular fight. Paddy Pimblett is not a regular fighter. What the fuck is going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the Kevin Hoop Show. Once again, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And we've got the whole breakdown of UFC 282 today. It is Monday, and after the weekend, there's been some news released. We've got all the fights to talk about that actually happened on Saturday. And a lot of stuff was talked about after in the press conferences, and I think that there's some interesting things to look at in particular, especially when it comes to some of the fights that Dana White said is going to be happening in the future, and a very close future. It's very, in the next month or two, the next couple fights that he was talking about are actually going to be happening and not happening, apparently. But without further ado, let's get into this. If you go back 1, 2, 3 videos on this channel, it's the Paddy Pimblett breakdown. I predicted it at the very end. I said it's going to go to a Paddy Pimblett decision, or it's going to go to a decision, and Paddy Pimblett is going to get it in the win. And what do you know happened, ladies and gents? I figured if it was going to be a similar thing to the Sean O'Malley thing. And that's exactly what it was. You had a really good fight, pretty back and forth, kind of one-sided in an aspect of on the ground and control time on the ground. Both fights had the other fighter having more ground control. They had all the control all of the fight on the ground and maybe a little bit of control when they were striking. But a big thing I noticed in Paddy Pimblett's game that changed between the first and second round is him kind of going back and forth on the fights. Or Paddy Pimblett is a fighter to always be pushing the fight. He's always walking down the other fighter. And we did not see that in the second or third round. And I think that's a little interesting thing to look at when it came to how Paddy was thinking in the fight. And I know he was talking about an injury with his knee or his ankle. So that might be something that we might have to actually investigate. I know today is the day he's actually going to be getting it checked out. So there might be some news later on today or maybe while we're doing this. But yeah, very interesting fight between Paddy Pimblett and Jared Gordon. An even bigger decision that was kind of surprising and not surprising was in the following fight in the main event with Magomed Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz, or Jan Blachowicz. I think it's Jan Blachowicz is what that's how everyone says his name. I don't fucking know. I'm terrible with fucking names, so I'm just going to say Jan Blachowicz. If you live under a rock, that shit went to a draw. Now, if you ask me, I think the Paddy Pimblett and Jared Gordon fight could have been a draw, and the judges somehow realized or got like a fan reaction that they fucked up in that last fight against Paddy Pimblett and Gordon. So they were like, you know what, we don't want any backlash for this fight. No matter who we choose, we're just going to go to a draw. No one can give us any backlash. And I mean, it definitely was a close fight. I don't know if it could have went to a draw, but we'll get into that. The card actually opened out, though, with my main boy, Bryce Mitchell. And I've been behind Bryce Mitchell since his first fight in the UFC, since his debut, since I heard that fucking country accent, and then I heard that he fucking worked on a farm. I was just like, that is my motherfucking dude. Goddamn garage door. Benefits of having your studio on top of a garage. It's great for when people are entering the building. It's just fantastic. And in about a minute to 30 seconds, you're going to hear it be closing. And it's just absolutely great. Just wonderful for production. Anyways, I'm a big fan of Bryce Mitchell. He opened up the main event. I don't know if that was something that maybe got his fight jitters or made him not feel as comfortable. But Ilia Topuria completely wiped the mat with him. It was a straight one-sided fight, in my opinion. Bryce Mitchell might have got some strikes in there. I don't really haven't. That's the one fight I really didn't actually pull the stats and look at the stats very closely in. But Ilia Topuria showed a lot of good game on the ground. He showed a lot of good experience on the ground, which I think is something that's good to look at. And he hasn't moved up in the rankings yet, but he was ranked 14 and Bryce Mitchell was ranked 9, so he's definitely going to be moving up in the rankings. Will it not give me his history? It definitely, yeah, view fight history. Please and thank you. What's the recap? He got it by submission. I want to say it was a rear naked, but it might have been something else. What does the recap show me? Oh, okay, all right. That's actually the thing that I wanted to have up. Perfect, perfect, perfect. It just says submission method by submission. I don't know. It won't give me the exact way he won, but it is what it is. That's what I want to look at. So the total strikes was actually pretty even. The takedowns is, yeah, where Ilia Topuria really, really advanced in the fight. And I thought that's coming from someone who thought Bryce Mitchell had some good ground game. He has those cauliflower ears. I definitely thought he had some wrestling experience. But maybe it's more of just like high school level wrestling experience. Maybe not college D1 level wrestling experience. Which, it's nothing it's definitely not something needed to fight in the UFC. You don't need to be a D1 wrestler. But if you don't have any other sort of ground or grappling experience or techniques to use, I do think you're going to get caught in the second round like he did. Now, that's nothing to say that he's not going to be fighting someone ranked in his next fight. I do think he's still a pretty good up-and-coming fighter. If we look, I want to see his actual record. I wonder when they're actually going to update the rankings as well. I don't know when they update them. I always thought it was Mondays is when they updated them. It might be later in Monday. I mean, it's 1:23 right now. I'll upload this by 5. And, of course, that's probably when it'll be updated at the end of the fucking day. Like, wonderful. So then I'll have to make shit later this week on the rankings. Wonderful. Which is, fine for me. Fine for me. 3, 4, 5 fights in the UFC. He's been on a 5-fight win streak. So, first loss in the UFC, it might have been in his off day. We might have caught him on an off day. I mean, he's only won one fight by submission. All of his other fights have went to a decision, and that's when he's won. So that might be a factor. Maybe he's just not that finishing quality type of fighter. Maybe that's something he's got to work on. But I do think he's still someone to look at. I don't think he's someone to count out yet. And I do think Ilia Topuria is someone to definitely be looking out for in that featherweight division because he's moving up in the rankings and he's calling out guys like fucking Paddy Pimblett, which I think, you've got to have some balls to be calling out Paddy Pimblett. At least that's what I thought. We thought Paddy the Baddy is fucking this bad motherfucker, but maybe he's not as batty as we fucking thought. All right? Everyone's over here stroking the Paddy train, but maybe it's not the train that we need to be on quite yet. The next fight after that fight, actually, I don't know if it was the exact fight right after it. I want to say it was. Could be wrong. Don't think I was, though. I'm usually not wrong on these things. I want to say it was Darren Till. Yeah. Darren Till versus Dricus du Plessis. I think there was a good amount of hype behind some UK fans for this, especially fans for Darren Till. And, even me, I thought Darren Till, this was going to be one of his comeback fights. If he was going to make another run for the title or just, have some good fights in the UFC, this would be the start of that. And we did not see that at all. I think Darren Till might have had a strategy of maybe wearing his opponent out because in the first 30 seconds of the fight, he's up against the cage and du Plessis just right against his face. Darren Till's barely guarding himself. After the first round, his eyes almost fully fucking shut, super, super puffed up. And whether that was his game plan or whether he just got caught in a bad situation or he's just losing the motivation to fight anymore, That's what I saw in the fight, though. I saw a fighter who didn't really know why he wanted to be there. Whether it's Darren Till moving on, I heard that there was rumors of him that being his last fight, or no, not it being his last fight, and it's not a rumor. It's confirmed that that's the last fight of his UFC contract. So it's going to be interesting to see if he re-signs with the UFC, whether they're going to, have a lot of negotiating differences with the UFC because he's on that losing streak now. And kind of been on that losing streak. Had definitely been on the decline since he lost to Jorge Masvidal. And, that might be the main thing that caused one of these, this big decline in his career right now, because he was supposed to win that fight. A lot of people thought he was going to be the fighter to come out on top on that fight, and it did not turn out that way at all. And then you go out and see Jorge Masvidal have such a great career, or a great year at least, in that 1 year time period after he wins that, and definitely raked in a lot of money. So that might be something that's in the back of Darren Till's head of, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but, definitely never happened. The next fight we're moving on to was the Santa. And another thing I want to mention on the DDP, Dricus du Plessis, he is moving up in the middleweight division. He definitely has been looking good throughout his last fights. His record's 19-1, 20-1 now. After that, I want to say he called out someone like Izzy, or no, he might have called out Whitaker, which I honestly liked as a call out because that's definitely going to be a good striking match between the two. I don't think he's necessarily been challenged too much. Travers, Gills, definitely fought some alright guys. He's only had 4 fights in the UFC though, so definitely is going to have to start making a name for himself. 18-2 on his record. I don't know if that. I think that is updated after the Darren Till fight too. He's 18-2 after fighting Darren Till. 2 losses on his record. 7 wins by knockout. 9 by submission. That's interesting. I definitely thought he was more of a striking heavy type of fighter. Definitely was really good on the feet against Till, but might have just been doing that to try and get it on the inside clinch, because Till definitely did have an inch or two on the reach. So, moving on, like I said earlier, before I wanted to get that last little bit in on the Darren Till fight, Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Alex Morono, which was probably one of the more underrated fights of the card, but probably had the best highlight reel of the whole entire card, other than maybe some of the prelims. Alex Morono was the fighter that was subbed in for Robbie Lawler because Robbie Lawler had an injury. I don't know too much about what happened with that injury, or if he's going to be able to get that fixed for 2023, especially with his age definitely getting up there in age a little bit. But Santiago Ponzinibbio was getting absolutely fucking demolished this fight. And maybe not demolished, but he definitely wasn't winning the first 2 rounds. And it didn't look like he was going to be winning the 3rd round until I'd say like halfway through he really started to, find his rhythm, find some timing, and got that second wind, I think, of some energy. And I think his corner also had a good thing in his I think what his corner said was, you lost the first 2 rounds. You have to go out in this 3rd round and get a knockout or you're going to lose. And sometimes corners aren't straight up with their fighters, or maybe the corner themselves don't even know who won. But I think that that's something that some corners, have and some corners don't. And that's something that his corner definitely told him. And he came out in the 3rd round and showed up. He caught Alex Morono, got him stunned, and finished the fight, got the finish, and came out with the dub after, maybe not even having a fight on the December 10th card, which I think could have, definitely would have been unfortunate to happen, but, he definitely made best of the opportunity that was given to him and the opportunity he was putting in the fight and coming out on top with the knockout. I didn't even know much about Santiago Ponzinibbio until this fight. I believe he's a Brazilian fighter, and, not too high in the rankings, not, the most intimidating fighter. but definitely might be coming out in the. I don't even know what the weight division he's fighting in. I know they fought at catch weight. Um, maybe somewhere down here. No, nope. So not even the top 15. So maybe not. Maybe I was speaking out of pocket a little bit there. Maybe I should take what I was saying back about being up and coming, but definitely had a lot to work on when it came to his ground game. He definitely didn't get lucky, but came out and worked hard. Worked harder than his opponent in the third round, which is something that people were saying that happened with the Paddy Pimblett fight. I think a lot of people, and that's what we're going to be moving on to. But in the Paddy Pimblett fight, you saw the first 2 rounds, in my opinion, look like they went to Jared Gordon. And then Jared Gordon goes into the third round thinking he won the first 2. Let's take it slower. Let's kind of just have more exchanges in the clinch up against the fence. And that was the same thing that Paddy Pimblett said that was his game plan. Paddy Pimblett thought that he won the first 2 rounds and that Jared Gordon was, putting the clinch up against the fence, and Paddy Pimblett was just going to go kind of cruise control for the rest of the third round because he already thought he had the first 2 in the bag. Now, in my opinion, I had Jared Gordon winning the first 2, and I thought it was smart for Jared Gordon to go along with that strategy in the third round to keep it in the clinch and, to not get caught, because you see Kamaru Usman, you see, who's the other big fight that just lost? Israel Adesanya. And, it's happened in other championship fights or in other big number 1 contender fights where someone is completely one-sided winning the fight. And in the 5th round, you see Santiago Ponzinibbio just fucking did it. Losing the first 2 rounds, comes out in the third and gets a knockout. Because Alex Morono was willing to strike with him. I think Jared Gordon did not want to put himself in that predicament because he thought he had already done the work to win the fight. And in my opinion, I thought he did. But at the same time, what was not going through my head was this is not a regular fight. Paddy Pimblett is not a regular fighter. He's just not the every average Joe fighter on the UFC roster. Paddy Pimblett is one of the biggest names on the UFC roster right now, one of the biggest draws when it comes to selling out arenas, especially when it comes to your London draw or international draws in Europe. Paddy Pimblett is that guy right now. So even when it comes to things like the judges getting paid, the Nevada State Athletic Commission getting paid, referees getting paid, everybody benefits when Paddy Pimblett wins. Everybody gets paid just a little bit more if Paddy Pimblett is doing good. And I'm not saying that's the main reason he won. I'm not saying that's the main thing that was going through the judges' heads when they made that decision. But I do think that is a thing that you have to think about when it comes to what happens in these big matches with a prize fighter or a big influential person that has a very big following that brings a lot of good things to the MMA community in general. If you look at Conor McGregor, he basically, I'm not saying he had fights, go to a decision and he won because of that, but I'm saying Conor McGregor brought a lot of good things to the sport, especially when it comes to viewership and comes to helping fighters getting paid more. And I do think that it was a good thing that Dana White gave everyone a $50,000 fighter bonus at the end of the fight. It wasn't just one performance bonus or one fight of the night. He gave everyone a little Christmas $50,000 bonus, which I do think he might have done because all of this scrutiny that Jake Paul's bringing on and shining light on when it comes to the UFC being one of the lowest paid sports in MMA or in martial arts in general when it comes to fighting sports. If you look at a lot of jiu-jitsu practitioners, a lot of them are actually starting to get paid a lot more. If you look at One Championship, if you look at Flow Grappling, or you just look at jiu-jitsu practitioners like Gordon Ryan, Craig Jones, and other high-level people like the Rotolo brothers making their own instructionals and making money and income off of instructionals and teaching people their techniques. The UFC can definitely rank a little lower compared to other organizations when it comes to fighting as a whole. So I do think that was a nice thing that Dana White did. Now, I did say that, it definitely, in my opinion, in that first video, I was one-sided, I could say. I didn't rewatch the highlights. I didn't rewatch anything. I literally ended the stream of the watch party right after the fights happened. Um, Ended up cleaning up the room a little bit, got the studio all set up for the one-person video, and hit record. It wasn't really any rewatching the fights or looking at stats. I had the stats already pulled up because I was always looking at the stats after each fight when the fights were happening, but I didn't really, go that in depth. And I do think one of the things I wasn't thinking about when I said uh, the whole entire thing about the fights or the stats themselves being changed. I don't think the stats were changed, but I do think that they were updated a little after the fight happened. So the stats that I was looking at might have been the stats that was being presented for the second round, and the third round stats might have not been updated for the final fight stats that I was looking at when I actually was recording the video. Because I said the stats were changed for at least for the second time when I looked at them for the second time. And they definitely were. I do know that, but I do think that it might have been because they just were updated, or maybe not all of the strikes were counted, and they went back right after and replayed the whole entire thing and counted each single strike. Something like that could have happened easily that they might do for every single fight. I don't know. I'm not behind the UFC. I'm not behind the scenes on the stats and updating the stats, so that might be a factor. It might be something that I need to work on when it comes to making the videos and making sure I'm looking at the right stats and figuring out when they update the stats. So that was something on my part, and I do think I did rewatch some of the highlights from the fight, and I definitely think Paddy Pimblett won the striking exchanges. I do think Jared Gordon got some good strikes in there as well. I don't think it was one-sided in the striking for Paddy Pimblett. I do think it was probably 70-30, and Paddy Pimblett had that 70% advantage in the striking. And, I do think Jared Gordon definitely showed that he had ground control. But if you listen to what Paddy Pimblett was talking about after the fights, he said it in the press conference. He said, I feel like I'm about to sneeze. Fuck. There's a tickle and there it is. Oh. Oh my gosh. Is it 4 and done, or is it going to be a 5? I'm not too sure. Let me take a quick drink just to make sure. I forget where I was. I do think that Jared Gordon did win when it comes to grappling, and if the judges scored the grappling and the grappling was scored more heavily in the decision making of who won the fight, I think it goes to Jared Gordon all day. But if you listen to what Paddy Pimblett said in the press conferences, he talks about how judging now is scored off of damage. And if you look at the damage, Paddy Pimblett looked like he barely got hit, if hit at all. He definitely got hit, but was it that powerful of a hit? Was it going to make a bruise? Did it really stun him? Did it, make him, look like he was hurt? I really don't think so. Jared Gordon, on the other hand, looks like he just went through 5 rounds against Muhammad Ali. So I do think that might be a factor in the future judging, and might be a change in some of the fighters' strategies when it comes to these championship fights or number one contender fights, because that's something that's big in people's strategy and game plans going into fights, whether they're going to take it more safe, as people would like to call it, and, focus more on the ground. And if you're a wrestler, that's most likely where you're going to have the advantage in the fight. So you're going to try and take it to the ground and try and have control on top and get all of your significant strikes and damage from the fight on the ground, compared to someone who's striking heavy or a more experienced striker and is, going to be trying to manage the distance more and not get hit on the feet and, get more strikes and counter punches when it comes to those types of exchanges. So, are we going to see fighters have more of a striking heavy sort of game plan going into some of these championship fights. I think that's something that's going to be interesting. We've seen, I think, more of a grappling heavy jiu-jitsu style fighting in the past recent couple of years. That is what the game plan to success has been, I think, for a lot of fighters. And if that changes because a lot of things are going off of damage, what gets paid is highlight reels now. You get a 2-minute highlight reel with 5 different knockouts. That could make you $1,000,000 nowadays. So I'm not saying that it's 100% changing. I'm not saying Paddy Pimblett's going to be looking for these damage fights, where he's just all damage and all striking. I do think that is more of his style, though. He definitely is more of that striking heavy type of fighter. He definitely has good striking when it comes to powerful strikes and significant strikes actually mattering. And, he definitely gets on the inside with uppercuts and knees and elbows in any different way than we've really kind of seen before. So I think that's a big thing to look at in his style and how fighters are going to try and fight against Paddy and make a game plan against Paddy when it comes to fighting against him. Where else do we have to go in this podcast? I don't think. Let's see who else we've got, because I'm 99% sure that fight was at light heavyweight. And the reason I say this is because I think I misspoke a little bit of talking about the weight division that Paddy Pimblett was fighting in. And I think I misspoke on that because he actually moved up in weight classes. Now, if he did that, that would be because why I misspoke, because I must have been looking at a past or a different fight that I meant to be looking at, or was going off of statistics, off of something else. Paddy Mike, who the fuck is this guy? Who the fuck is this guy? Let me just search in the UFC. Search, please. Paddy. Oh, okay, so I have to hit it twice. That makes a lot of sense, man. This UFC website is just phenomenal. Just absolutely phenomenal. Is it going to tell me the weight division they were fighting at? Let's see. Recap. I don't think it is. Lightweight bout. Alright, so yeah, he's been fighting at lightweight, I think, in every fight in the UFC. I might have just been tripping or something. Recap. That is what I want. Please and thank you. Here it is. Lightweight. So yeah, he's been fighting at lightweight this whole time. I don't know why, but I think I said I would have liked to see him fight Bryce Mitchell or something. I don't remember what I said, but I definitely think I mentioned that he was going to fight someone in a different weight division, which I should not have said. Or I was talking about him going up to lightweight. But a thing I noticed, and I mentioned it earlier, was in the second round, I saw Paddy Pimblett moving back. Paddy Pimblett's always someone to be walking down his opponent. He's always pushing the fighter back. There's people that walk back in fights and fight from walking backwards, and there's people that fight by walking forwards. And Paddy Pimblett's usually one of those fighters who walks or fights by walking forwards. He fights moving forward usually. I saw in the second round he started backing up. It was Jared Gordon walking forward. And in my opinion, and even Steven's opinion, the guy that I do this whole entire show with and who edits the videos, he even said that he thought that Paddy Pimblett's gas tank was just, emptied in that second round. And, if you look at each round individually, you have the first round where I think Paddy Pimblett goes as hard as he possibly can. He empties that gas tank. Second round, he did not look like he was there at all. We did not see the Paddy Pimblett we are used to seeing in that second round. And in the third round, he just coasts. So even if him saying that he won the first and second round, there's no way he thought he won that second round, in my opinion. So if you're looking at which rounds he's winning, I'd say he won the first and third round. And I know that there wasn't even a lot of strikes in the third round in general. And, I really think that it was one of those fights where if Jared Gordon was going to get a win, it was going to have to be a 10-8 in each fucking round or a fucking knockout or submission. And unfortunately, Paddy Pimblett got the win for him. And I do want to say this because I think it's why we saw him so gassed in that second round. And it's got to be because of the weight cut. If he's walking around at 205, which he said, and other people have said he's looked like 200 plus pounds on multiple different occasions, I do think that that's something that he's got to think about when out of fight camp. When he's not fighting, maybe he only goes up to 170, 180. And I know he talks about being in America and all the American food not being good for him, but I do think that he's got to stay at a weight where he's not going to be able to, where his body can get used to that weight and not cutting so much and getting used to a way heavier weight and having not as much cardio at that heavier weight. Now, is he doing a lot of cardio at 205 pounds? I don't know. Does he look way better at 180 pounds compared to 205? 100%. The dude looks like he literally balloons up at 205 or just balloons up after a fight in general. So I do think that's something he's got to think about when it comes to his gas tank and his cardio in general and what we're going to see in his next fights. Because if he balloons up again and he fights someone that's just as hard or if not harder than Jared Gordon, I think he's going to face some problems. Or if you really talk about down the line, if he keeps on winning, when he starts to get into those 5-round fights, how is his gas tank going to be then? Especially if he's going to be continuously ballooning up to 205, I can guarantee you it's not going to be as good in 5 rounds compared to 3. It's going to be completely worse in those 4th and 5th rounds. And you see a lot of guys struggle who don't balloon up to 205 fucking pounds or just, 50-pound weight gain after their fights. Just to have that 4th and 5th round added on to your fights when you're fighting for your fucking life, it's something that not a lot of people experience, especially when you have a whole entire crowd behind you and you're trying to meet expectations that can be hard to meet sometimes. It's not easy being at the top. If anything, it's harder than trying to build yourself up. Everyone wants to take you down when you're at the top. No one knows who you are when you're trying to build yourself up, which might be a problem that Paddy Pimblett's going to be facing. I talked about it in the last video. What is it going to look like when Paddy Pimblett faces a guy that's actually ranked in the top 15 or ranked in the top 10? It's very hard to get into the top 10 in the UFC, and Paddy Pimblett's not even ranked yet. Nor has he fought anyone that has been ranked or that really seems to bring him a challenge. And I think we saw that in the Jared Gordon fight. We saw him face some challenge. Now, was it as much of a challenge as everyone is perceiving and even as I perceived? I don't think so. I do think that, if he did have an injury, if he did face an injury leading up to that fight or when the fight was happening, I do think that that's a challenge that he overcame for sure. And I do think that he faced the challenges that Jared Gordon gave him and showed him pretty well. I do think that he could have shown more in that 3rd round. But when it comes down to what happens next for Paddy Pimblett, I think it's going to be very similar to what happens with Sean O'Malley. Sean O'Malley, there was talks of him facing Sterling after he beat Peter Yan, and I think a lot of people, especially higher up in the UFC, were like, maybe not yet. I think if he fights Aljamain Sterling, he's going to get his ass fucking kicked. Does he think that? I don't know. But I do think that he does realize that he has some skill, and he was put in the trenches in that fight. he was put in the trenches and faced a lot of challenges and difficulty that he may have not faced as a fighter yet. So I do think that you're going to see the same thing with Paddy Pimblett. Maybe not as much. I think his next fight should at least be someone in the top 15. If not someone in the top 10, at least someone in the top 15. If we look at some of the people in the top 15 right now, let's go to rankings, lightweight division. We've got Islam Makhachev as the champ, Michael Chandler as number 5, Rafael Fivez as number 6, RDA as number 7, Mastez Garmont, that might be a good one. I believe we saw him fight on the Islam undercard, if not on the Israel Adesanya undercard. So that might be a good fight for him. The Conor McGregor-Michael Chandler fight I know is also being rumored. We'll talk about that later. Maybe Damir Ismagulov. Dan Hooker might be a good one. I know Dan Hooker might already be scheduled to fight somebody. I'm not 100% on that. Jalen Turner, Tony Ferguson, Renato Mosiano. Those are the people in the top 15 as I speak right now. Monday the 12th at 1:52 p.m. They do have to be updated after this weekend, but I don't think the lightweight division is going to be changing too much after this weekend. I don't think too many people fought this past weekend that was a lightweight. I know RDA fought 2 weekends ago on the Thompson Holland undercard. But I do think Paddy Pimblett has some matchups in the top 15. Now, whether he faces Conor McGregor or somebody like that, I don't think that, the UFC wants to do that, because if you have 2 prized fighters, they do better off of wins. So having them face off right away, especially on Conor McGregor coming back, I don't think that would be a smart move. Maybe you see Conor McGregor, Tony Ferguson when he comes back, and I think it's a big if he comes back. And that big if, the thing that we're waiting for is if he gets put back in the USADA pool in February. That's what he's saying he's going to do, and even after that, he still has to be in the USADA pool for 6 months. So, February, that's the second month. You have to wait till 8. So that's not until July, August he's fighting. So you have a Paddy Pimblett injury, though, too. So that's another thing to think about, of maybe he only fights 2 times next year. Maybe he waits 6 months, depending on the injury, depending on how bad it is. I know that he's probably going to want to fight in March. For those of you that don't know, we've got Rio de Janeiro in January, on January 21st. That's the pay-per-view UFC 283. Then February 4th, got like a week or 2 week turnaround on February 4th for UFC 284. And then UFC 285 is March 11th for UFC London. That's definitely going to be some exciting fights there. I also want to mention February 4th. I just said that was Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski. That's going to be in Australia at the Perth Arena. So definitely going to be an exciting fight for those 4 guys. And a fight that actually got mentioned that I'm going to kind of ties into what I want to talk about at the end here. I already mentioned it, Magomed Ankalaev versus Jan Blachowicz. It wasn't necessarily the most exciting fight. If you ask me, Glover Teixeira versus Yuri Prochowicz would have been 110% more entertaining. Magomed Ankalaev got a lot of takedowns and a lot of ground and pound control. There was some takedowns that Jan Blachowicz defended. There was a lot of striking back and forth on the feet when they were striking. A lot of lefts and rights connected. Magomed got stunned, I'd say maybe once or twice in the fight. Nothing really stunned Jan too much. I think that there was a lot of times that he was very tired, and that's where you see Magomed kind of capitalized. And I guess the judges thought that basically Magomed won on the ground, Jan won on the feet, but Magomed still, maybe instead of 70-30 like the Paddy fight, like I said, in the striking advantage, maybe it was more 60-40 on the feet and 80-20 on the ground, if not 100-0 on the ground for Magomed. So I think that's why you see a draw here. I do think it was somewhat of a close fight. I don't think if every fight was scored to be a draw like this one, I think we'd see a lot more draws. So I don't think you're going to see a lot of fights that happen like this fight go to a draw. I do think it should have went to Magomed if you're going to score it to a winner. But this is what happens in the UFC. These are things that we are dealt with. Now, right after, if you just want to talk about timelines, Dana White does the press conference right after the fight happens, the post-fight press conference. And I don't know if it was already being talked about or if it was already confirmed if this one doesn't deliver or if it goes to a draw or if no one gets knocked out, it's going to be a draw and then we're going to go to this fight in Rio. But in the press conference, Dana White was asked what's next for the lightweight division. And Dana White says right away, Glover Teixeira versus Jamal Hill, Rio de Janeiro. I don't know if he said Rio right away, but he definitely said Glover Teixeira versus Jamal Hill is going to be next. Now, within hours of that, people figure out that Jamal Hill was number one supposed to fight Anthony Lionheart Smith March 11th at London, and it was confirmed right away on the UFC page. As of Sunday and Monday, I checked both days. It has been confirmed on the Rio de Janeiro fight card, Jamal Hill. It's actually the main card of that, which I think is a little fugazi on the Brandon Moreno versus Davidson Figueiredo fight, because I'm a big fan of those two. I have watched each and every fight since it was the first fight, then the sequence in the second fight, then the trilogy, and now we're watching the fourth fight happen between them. And I think that might be getting pushed down to the co-main event. I'm not 100% sure, but if you go on the UFC website, the first fight of that UFC 283 main card, the first fight is Jamal Hill versus Glover Teixeira, and the second fight is Brandon Moreno versus Davidson Figueiredo. I don't know why, I don't know how, but that's the way it's going. I do think it is an entertaining card for sure. I believe Gilbert Burns is also fighting on that card as well as Johnny Walker. And I think if Gilbert Burns actually ends up coming out on top in that fight, I do think you see another run for the title that he might have. And maybe he faces Alex Pereira before Izzy comes back. Who knows? I know that there's a lot of Hamzat talk with Alex Pereira. I've talked a lot about that, actually. Go back on the channel and tune into those 2 or 3 videos that I talked about. There's been a lot of talk from Hamzat on that side of things. I think there was one other thing that I wanted to talk about when it came to this Magomed Ankalaev and Jan Blachowicz fight. I thought it was a little interesting that Dana had that on. I don't know if it was just confirmed after or what the deal was, but it was just a really weird card in the fact that you see Paddy win, and then right after that it was a draw. It was just 2 decisions that were really, I think, you had a lot of fans kind of 50-50 of thinking of which fighter won. Not necessarily thinking of 50-50 on who won. I think you see 50% of the fan base thinks Paddy Pimblett and Magomed Ankalaev won. And then you see another 50% of people think Jan Blachowicz won or Jared Gordon win. And I think that's why you have such a controversial card to begin with. And why it was so controversial afterwards and why so many people were saying, oh, Jared Gordon won, and we were on Twitter And I don't tweet on Twitter and say, oh, I think this person won, or I usually just react to things, and I go on Twitter to see the majority of people's reactions, because I want to see if I'm with the majority, if I'm against the majority, if I'm over here just seeing things and seeing things that I want to see happen, and that's why I'm going off of my opinion. I don't want to just, be a fan of a fighter and think that that fighter should have won just because I'm a fan of that fighter. And I would say I was a little bit of a fan of Jared Gordon and that comeback story. I'm always a comeback story fan. But once I heard that Jared Gordon was trained under John Danaher, I was immediately on that fucking Jared Gordon train, I think, a little bit, and expecting the upset. But I did also expect Paddy Pimblett to get that decision if it went to a decision. And I do think that that is a thing that I bring as someone who predicts and kind of keeps up with all of this UFC info. I try to keep a bias or an unbiased opinion as much as possible. And this is about to be where I'm about to get unbiased for you. But if you don't know, December 15th is going to be a submission grappling event that the UFC is going to be hosting on UFC Fight Pass. And the main event is going to be Gordon Ryan versus Vinny Mangalis. I think I said that right. I might be butchering his last name a little bit. But I'm a big-ass fucking Gordon Ryan fan. He is the fucking king of jiu-jitsu. I've just been getting into jiu-jitsu just this past year recently. And I've been a big fan of Gordon Ryan the whole entire year through his ADCC run. Through any other fucking call out that he does or any trash talking that he's doing, I'm just I'm along for the ride, and I think Gordon Ryan is changing the jiu-jitsu game a little bit and definitely bringing it to the mainstream media when it comes to MMA fans in general being able to access and watch jiu-jitsu. And I'm all for it. I would definitely like to see jiu-jitsu be watched more, and hopefully I can do more breakdowns of jiu-jitsu matches that you guys would like. The IBJJF, which if you or the IBJJ Worlds, the International Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu World event just happened this past weekend, the same weekend of UFC 282. And there was just a lot of tournaments, a lot of matches going on, a lot of winners. I know Jonatas Gracie, big fan of his just because of that event. I know Mikey Musumeci's sister Tammy Musumeci. I know she got a win. I know another Elizabeth Campo. I know she won her weight division and ended up losing in the open class event. But a lot of interesting jiu-jitsu matches happening this weekend, and a lot of interesting things happening in the jiu-jitsu world. I do think that catch grappling or submission grappling in general is going to be a sport that's up and coming, and you're going to see a lot more of in the future. And I do believe I actually am going to be doing a live party that Thursday night, December 15th. If you guys are a jiu-jitsu fan, if you guys are a UFC fan, I guarantee you Miesha Tate is also going to be fighting in the card. I do believe it's going to be a tournament-style event. I will have to look more into the details of that. I probably will do a video Thursday before I upload the watch party, before the watch party goes live. I'll do a video kind of promoting it and explaining exactly how the event's going to happen. But tune in for that Wednesday or Thursday. No matter what, there's going to be a Wednesday uploaded or a video uploaded on Wednesday. Don't forget, guys, if you want to listen to the audio version of this podcast, tune in to anchor.fm/the Kevin Hoops podcast. It will be changed to the Kevin Hoops Show eventually. I'm still working out on a name for this channel. I might be making a change or two in the near upcoming future. Still brainstorming ideas. I'm still trying to see if I like the Kevin Hoops Show as the official name for this channel. But don't worry, the content is not going to be changing. You are going to be seeing all UFC content and jiu-jitsu content coming from this channel, whether it's from the UFC or the UFC Fight Pass or some international Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world events. We're going to be talking about it here, going over it in this podcast, as well as some 10-minute clips and videos that I upload after the week has already kind of started. A lot of news happens as well. So if you guys want to tune in later in the week for upcoming news and upcoming stuff, predictions, breakdowns, we do all of that on this channel. But if you want to listen to just the audio version of this kind of content, the hour-long version podcast, that is going to be on Apple Podcast, Spotify Podcast, the audio version only, as well as the video version if you want to look at the video version. But I'm assuming you're watching this on YouTube, so if you're already watching this on video version, I don't expect you to go over there and watch the video over there unless you're a big fan of Spotify and really like watching videos over there. But I know for a lot of people on the go, they enjoyed listening to podcasts just audio only. So you can catch those over on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and really anywhere you listen to your podcast. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I really do appreciate you guys watching this content and hitting the subscribe button. We've been growing more fast than I ever have uploading content. So any of you new guys coming in and rewatching the content, I really appreciate it, and I welcome you to the channel. Don't forget to let me know who you guys think is going to be winning these fights, or what you guys thought about the fights that happened. Let me know if you guys know who Gordon Ryan is or know anything about jiu-jitsu in general. If not, I do know that there's going to be an upcoming card this Saturday with the 17th. So we will be doing breakdowns and a watch party for that as well. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this podcast. Have a great motherfucking day.